Cities are defined by their cultures. Those cultures could entail sports or business or certainly arts and entertainment. Oklahoma City is thriving in all of these areas. But who makes that all happen? This Town OKC explores the people behind the cultures, their origins, their motivations, their challenges, and their dreams. I'm Rick Allen Lippert. I've been in this town for over 50 years with a front row seat to seeing the culture grow from a dusty bus stop on the Southern Plains to a flourishing destination. Join me as we meet the folks behind the culture on This Town OKC. Julia Kirt, thank you for joining me on This Town OKC.
I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. I need to tell everyone This Town OKC is sponsored by Carpenter Square Theater, where we produce 8 shows a season, 10 performances of each show. Thursday nights are half price, 2 Sunday matinees. All right, back to Julia. Let me start by telling you what I think I know about you.
Okay.
I know that you're currently, and I know I try to keep this evergreen, but currently, as we record this in late February of 2026, you're the Oklahoma State Senate Minority Leader. Is that correct?
That's right.
And before that, you ran the Oklahomans for the Arts.
Yes.
And that's about all I know.
All right, great.
So,
good.
Where are you from?
Well, so my dad was in the Air Force, so I was actually born abroad. I was born in the UK. We moved back here because this is where my mom's family's from. So,
okay.
Yeah, so I went to school in Norman. I started in England. Went to school in Norman, went to Austin High. And
At what age did you move back to the States?
5 years old.
Okay, so...
So I just got a little snippet of living abroad. My godparents are over there.
Yeah.
Moved back here, and then I graduated in Austin, Texas, because my mom went to grad school when I was in high school, and then went to Minnesota for college, and then came back. I was just going to stay for a couple months after college, save some money, and then here I am. Yeah. I've been here a while.
What kept you here?
You know, when I came back, I just kind of fell in love with the potential of Oklahoma, the creative potential. I fumbled into museum work. I did an internship at the Maybe Gare Museum in Shawnee. I was kind of casting about for my career direction. In college, I just took every class possible. I wanted to learn about everything.
Right.
And so I only got...
What time period are we talking about?
So
here?
I graduated college in 1995.
Okay.
Yeah, and I went to McAllister College in St. Paul, Minnesota. I took a little bit of everything. It was a small college, so I got to have, a well-rounded degree. But, I got back to Oklahoma, and my mom said, well, what career path are you going on? And, I was pretty baffled. And she said, what'd you find out in career development services? I know they have and I was like, I never darkened the door of that place. I just was not focused on next steps. So she sent me out to interview people about their lives. So I did my own little oral history project when I was trying to find a career path. Because she just said, why don't you go talk to people about your interests? I worked at a bookstore, Bollinger's Books, you may remember. Pre-Chains, right?
Lee Bollinger and I were on the board of Oklahoma Children's Theater together back in the 80s and 90s.
Well, that bookstore was a real nice landing spot for, someone who had just come out of, studying all the time, talking to lots of smart people. So it's nice to be at a bookstore for that. But I didn't have a direction. So talking to people, I actually ended up in a meeting with Blake Wade, who was running the Historical Society at the time. And this is, having a parent with a network kind of helped that. And he said, well, you should try museums. You might like museum education, because I described what I liked. I did film in college. I thought I was going to go into the film industry.
Was that your major?
No.
Okay.
We had interdisciplinary degrees. Okay. So I got a communication studies degree. But in the summers, I worked on films and TV shows. But then I just kind of decided that wasn't my path. And what I really loved about that was teamwork. I loved the creativity. And I just knew I wanted to work on something creative, right? But I'm not the artist myself. I'm really more the stage manager type, right?
Right.
So he sent me out to talk to these folks at Maybe Gare, said, why don't you go intern with them? Well, it led to this whole path, right? Yeah. So I interned with them. I got to help, that museum is amazing, as a side note. Mummies, they have Renaissance art, they have contemporary art. So I got to do a little bit of everything. I learned about nonprofits and how, if you're willing, you can do everything. I wrote Renaissance text and labels. I helped sweep up for the openings. I helped host the openings. I helped plan fundraisers. And so from that, I ended up at the Oklahoma City Museum of Art as a preparator, helping hang exhibits, prepare art. And that led me into my art career. After that, I ran the Oklahoma Visual Arts Coalition that worked with artists all over the state.
Right.
And actually officed with Carpenter Square. So I'm very familiar with Carpenter Square because we
Was
officed
that
in Stage Center.
At Stage Center, yeah.
Yep, for that whole time period that we overlapped. I was at OVAC 15 years.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and then I was at Oklahomans for the arts. So I think I went farther on my path than you asked me.
No.
But,
That was perfect. I was on the board of the Individual Artists of Oklahoma.
Oh, sure.
With John McNeese.
Oh, yeah.
When he announced that he was forming OVAC.
Wow. So John just passed away.
I know.
What a legend.
Yeah.
I mean, someone was asking me about him because I was real sad when I heard he died. I mean, he's elderly, but I think John is a great example to us of people who keep a growth mindset their whole life. Because when I came in at OVAC, I was 24 when I was hired as the director of OVAC. And this is his baby that he had formed, this organization to help artists. And so very easily he could have been suspicious of me but he immediately was supportive and so excited to see what I would do. And every time we would start something new or end a program, he was like, "This is great. I'm so glad you're trying this." And like, he was like that his whole life, just someone who was trying to learn and grow, I loved it.
That's great. When did you start with Oklahomans for the Arts?
So I was at OVAC 15 years and really grew up with OVAC and helped the organization grow. So when we started, I was the first full-time director, which is why I got hired because they couldn't really afford someone with experience.
Right.
But it was such an amazing organization, and John McNeese really set it up to fill those gaps for visual artists across the state. Our state arts council can't provide money. We didn't have that's kind of support. So it was kind of the stuff that IAO couldn't do, the Visual Artists of Oklahoma couldn't do. And so we gave grants, we did fellowships, that kind of stuff. Got to grow that over time to fill different niches and needs and over time. And by the time I left, we had 1,000 members. The budget was about 500,000. And we were able to really make an impact on bringing in contemporary curators, on funding artists at really pivotal points in their business careers, helping them get written about, and also just building community among young artists. Momentum was one of our biggest things. And Momentum, we started to focus on young artists at Stage Centers where we started it. And then we did it in Tulsa as well. But, how do you get young artists out and connecting with each other right away? How do you get them engaged with the local community? So those were the things I worked on. When I left, it really was about family. I had my little kids and I was exhausted, working full-time as a director of a statewide organization. My son was in school and he's on autism spectrum, which we didn't know that then, but I was constantly having to leave work to go.
Sure.
And it was just too much. It was just a lot with the baby. So Oklahomans for the Arts needed a half-time director. And so it was kind of the perfect sideways move for me to run an organization I already believed in. I already did arts advocacy, but I got to ratchet back my time some, and have a little more balance with my parenting life,
So tell me about the mission of Oklahomans for the Arts. You mentioned advocacy. What does that mean to the folks who are listening who don't have any idea what that means?
It's about public resources, public awareness. We have state resources and state decisions being made all the time about what's going to be in our kids' education. What are we spending our public resources on? What are we using our public spaces for? So everything from public art to arts education in our schools to funding for the arts. That organization really was founded by people who were worried about our state's arts council, which has a really important role supporting our arts sector across the state.
Right.
And so literally going and asking the legislature and the governor to support the arts and making sure that stays in the budget. But it also has that broader mission of how do you make a case for the value of the arts? When I started at OVAC, people would laugh when I said I was in the arts. And you see us now where people have really embraced that about our city. Many cities, I wouldn't say the whole state has fully, but like the importance of the arts in our economy, the importance of creative people in our economy. That took a while to get people there. The best arts advocacy I've been a part of was public art in Oklahoma City. Like the change to be able to get an ordinance that allows public art to be permitted. Right. And then the percent for art so that there's a set aside budget for public art. And now we have public money. We also have a lot of private people commissioning art. So I think you've seen a real transition from it being kind of irrelevant and looked away from to consistently investing public money and making it easier to make it happen in public spaces.
I don't know which publication or which publications, but I know that Oklahoma City has been noted for its murals and its public art.
Yeah. I mean, I literally was in a meeting. I try to tell students about this. I don't know if it resonates with them, but Like when I was in my 20s, I never would have imagined this meeting I was in my 30s, which was the city of Oklahoma City. Robbie Kinzel, who was an amazing arts advocate who worked in city government and was very good at figuring out how to make systems work for creative things. She had a meeting for us to define art for City Development Office. So City Development Office is the office that does like the permitting.
Right.
You know, they do all the like, you pay your fee. Does it have to go through the city council? That kind of stuff. They didn't have a way to permit art. So it's like it didn't exist, right? So signs was how they were permitting art, as a sign. So we had to find a way to define it for a system. Now, as a young creative, I would have been really annoyed by that conversation. But later I realized this is the kind of thing you have to do if you want public resources. You
Right.
have to be able to explain it in the terms that make sense.
Right.
So that's advocacy right there. you know?
Okay. All right. And thankfully, she was successful.
She did a great job.
And
yeah.
I worked at the city of Oklahoma City in public information at the time that the ordinance was passed. I don't know if it's an ordinance or whatever that mandated that 1% of the cost of any building paid for by the
that was a
through
big
the city, 1% had to go to art.
Yeah.
And there was an outcry. Believe me, I remember there being an outcry. How dare they make us put beauty in?
Yeah. Well, and you think before that, the Arts Commission, Oklahoma City Arts Commission, had put it in the MAPS project because they were like,
Right.
okay, this is going to be the easiest way to. Whoever thought it up, probably James Loftus and some others, probably Robbie.
Yeah.
They said, oh, let's put it in the MAPS proposal. That way they start to get a taste of it.
Yeah.
And I think it really took people. Not everybody has experienced communities that have lots of fine art.
Right.
Have you been to Europe? Have you been to D.C.? That's where you really get those experiences. So if
Right.
they haven't had that as experience, it's hard to imagine why it'd be worthwhile until you've had it happen,
Yeah. Okay, so from Oklahomans for the Arts, you heard the calling to serve the greater good through the legislature.
Yeah.
Tell me about that process. What was the genesis of that? What motivated you? What kept you going?
Yeah, so some of it built over time because when I was at OVAC, Oklahoma Visual Arts Coalition, working with individual artists, trying to figure out how to help artists thrive in Oklahoma, I was in Guyman, I was in Godebo, I was wherever. There's creative people all over the state. And so over time, I got interested not just in those individual careers and how I could help them, find audiences or make their artwork or feel validated as artists, but also what are those systems that were holding them back or what was making it easier for them to thrive here? And at that time, one of the biggest issues with health was healthcare. I mean, independent artists could not get healthcare at all at that time. That's been a big change over time. Now it might cost too much, but you can't access it, right? Taxes, they didn't know how to deal with sales taxes. There were a lot of systems things. So I got more interested in state policy and how it was impacting people. And then the other thing was I got real interested in schools. So got very interested in arts education in schools. Where do kids have access to a well-rounded education that includes music, drama, visual arts? Where don't they? And how we could advocate for that. Then my kids started school, right? So while I was at Oklahoma Visual Arts Coalition, I had 2 kids, my first in 2007. But that really gives you a different lens because once my kids started school, very aware of those policy decisions, how they affect my kids. And when my kids started school was right before budget turndowns, right before the state budget crisis started coming, the first one. And they started making cuts at the school. And so I got pretty active in advocacy. And the second time around, my daughter was in school as well. And I was working at Oklahomans for the Arts. And so I was just livid. They cut the art teacher from my kids' elementary school.
Oh.
And so you can imagine how I felt about that.
Yeah.
But professionally, but also personally, I saw how important it was to my kids and to the school environment. And not only for the actual art making, but also having these teachers that are with those kids through their whole career in elementary school. And just having that, my daughter's dyslexic. So for her, having that visual arts outlet when she was not succeeding on the reading front was really important in keeping her happy, like keeping her engaged at school, right? So when they cut the art teacher, I got involved with a bunch of parents. We figured out how to pay for an artist in residence to work half-time at the school. But in that process, we found out from the district how many schools had no art And we were like, okay, this isn't going to stand, because they basically had no sympathy for our school. Cleveland was a school started by our neighborhood, restarted by our neighborhood in order to have arts and sciences. So they were like, well, your school had things other schools didn't. And as parents, we were like, well, that's unacceptable. And so between my art network professionally and my parent network, we combined to create this thing called Arts Partnership for OKCPS. And so we brought together art nonprofits that work with kids. We brought together district leadership. We brought together some chamber people, because we were like, how can we make sure our nonprofits are supporting what the schools need, and that all those resources aren't going to Wilson or Cleveland? They're also going to MLK. They're also going to the South Side. And this is, there's ballet wants to go and perform in schools. There's other places that want to have field trips. Like, how do we make sure those things happen all over the city? And so through that process, got really active with how do we set these kind of policy agendas where it really helped the district shift to that being a priority. Like when they closed schools, one of the priorities was making sure they had music and visual art at every elementary school in the district. That is because of that work those parents and those leaders did.
Wonderful.
Anyway, so this got me into advocacy, but then the budget shutdowns just sent me over the edge, because the dysfunction was so high. And as we advocated, we found that, okay, school board can't do anything because they're seeing these budget cuts. So who's making these decisions? It was the state legislature. And so I got way more interested in the state legislature. At the very same time, my senator said he was going to run for mayor. So Mayor Holt was my predecessor. And so suddenly there was this opportunity before me. And I'd happened to begin a book club that had 3 people in it, 1 that was an elected official, 2 that were starting to run. So suddenly I had all these resource people and just thought, well, if I'm going to do it, I should step in now, right?
Yeah.
And so 2017, I announced. 2018, I got elected.
Right. What's it been like for the past 8 years?
It's really an impossible.
You've won reelection.
Yeah, I got reelected once. I'll be up in November. If I win in November, that'll be my last term. We have a state question that the people passed that gave us 12 years max.
Right.
So the blessing of that is that I have a clear end time, when I would move on.
Right.
So it's the most intense job I've ever had, but it's very meaningful. I know I'm in the right place and that I'm trying my best to help people. It's been super challenging. My second year in office is when COVID hit. And we've had changes in presidential administrations have very much changed the way the state functions from year to year. So I just feel like every year there's some new crisis of various sorts. Some are self-created. Right. Some are created by the federal government. So that is very intense. But for me, I said I never wanted to pick a major and that I took classes and everything. That's my life now as a senator, because everybody wants to inform me about their issue, what their sector, whatever they think is most important for our state. And I am glad to learn. I get to learn from everybody. I get to go on tours. I get to learn about how they work. And then
Is every day a field trip for you?
It could be, if I chose to. The other big thing is, coming out of the nonprofit sector, I didn't know how much that trained me to be a good legislator for the finance side. Because as a nonprofit person, you have to be very assiduous about every dime. You have to justify your money. You have to be able to look at spreadsheets. And so I entered the legislature better equipped than some of my colleagues to ask the hard questions. Apparently, the thing that makes me laugh is my budget was $500,000, which at that time I thought was big. Yeah. And now I'm literally looking at $5 million budgets, $10 million budgets. Our overall state budget's between 12 and 14 billion. So it doesn't matter how many zeros, I am able to ask critical questions. I'm able to try to analyze the information given to me. So I've ended up being a big budget nerd, it's difficult, but it's satisfying, because it's one of the most important things we do is taking people's tax money and figuring out what those priorities, how we're going to fund the priorities of the state. There's a lot of performative things that happen in the legislature, and it's hard to separate sometimes. But one of the things I've found is that I'm incredibly able to compartmentalize when necessary. I don't think I could have done it in my 20s, which is, I might have a very frustrating conversation in the morning about a specific bill that I think is really harmful for our state. But in the afternoon, I might be working with that same senator on a project. Because I'm going to work with the people that can get things done that might make a difference. Right. I'll have somebody that I might disagree with them many times, but then, they're willing to work on mental health issues, or they're willing to work on reducing the cost of insurance. Well, I'm going to jump in and try to find that common ground when I can. Right.
Personally, I think that's why you're successful and why you're the minority leader in the Senate, because you have that skill and that desire to find that common ground. Mm-hmm. I don't expect you to give me any big secret reveal, but you mentioned being term limited.
Mm-hmm.
Do you anticipate continuing to seek election?
I don't know. My heart is still in nonprofit work. I could see going back into nonprofits or some kind of, philanthropy-oriented work. I don't know. I mean, I have zero interest in being in Washington, D.C. I can say that real clearly. The scale of it, the international issues are not where my heart is. My heart is really within the state lines.
Sure.
I've, from my very beginning of my career, have focused inside the state and really love rural Oklahoma and the connections there. But I don't know. I mean, having a term limit is weird because I probably do need to start thinking about it. But at the same time, I don't want it to distract me from the work I'm doing that I think is really important.
Without talking about any pending legislation, what are the issues you think our legislature needs to be focusing on for the next few years? I know we have a current push to raise our 50th place in education to model after the Mississippi Miracle, as I think that's what they call it. Besides that, what other issues do you think the state should be just focusing on
education briefly? I think we have to stop thinking about it in short-term ways. I worry, one of the reasons that I got real aggravated with the legislature when my kids were young was the changing policy from year to year. When my kid entered pre-K, they passed the Reading Sufficiency Act, and they changed it 3 times before he took his 3rd grade reading test.
Oh, geez.
So like if we don't make a commitment that lasts a while, we're not going to see the impact for kids. My son's in his senior year right now. So he's actually 15 years in because he did pre-K, kindergarten, and he did 1st grade twice. He's 15 years in. Like the decisions made by legislators 17 years ago affected him more than anything. And so one of my goals is that we make a commitment to kids in our educational planning and funding so that it's not a short-term fix. I think people are aggravated with too many initiatives, too many flash in the pan kind of things. I mean, one of the biggest things is just our systems, the fairness of our systems, our ethics systems and election systems. There's a lack of trust in government. And I think that's for good reason. Of course, campaign finance is a big problem. And some of those things we can't change because those are Supreme Court decisions. But at the local level, people don't trust that we are checking on corruption, that we're keeping things fair when it comes to elections. And so that's a continual theme. For me, that's about the fairness of the systems we're working in. I also want to see the legislature itself functioning better. We do not have open meetings requirements or open records requirements in the legislature. And we're one of the few states that does not allow public testimony. So most states, if a bill comes up, there's some way that the public could make public testimony about it. In our state capital, that could be an option, but it's not the standard and it's not expected. And so you just have to go talk to your legislator in their own, office, or you call or you email.
Right.
It's not the same kind of public feedback that we need. And I contend that if we had public feedback at the Capitol, we would pass a whole lot fewer bad bills because you need to hear the consequences. A lot of times we're coming back and fixing problems later because we never let people tell us what the problems might be. Now, of course, there's going to be things we disagree on.
Right.
Of course, not everybody's opinion is perfect. But how do you get those perspectives? I think we need that in the legislature, And then really, I mean, the other big thing is around people being able to afford their life, cost of living in our state. Housing is going to be a long-term project. Oklahoma used to not have a problem with this, right? We were some of the lowest cost housing in the country. I mean, you think about when I stayed in Oklahoma, one of the reasons was cost of living.
Exactly.
I mean, I could work at a nonprofit. I bought my first house when I was 23.
Okay. Yeah.
And it was cheaper than renting.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, why not? And so that helped me stay because I had this great life, comfortable life. That's not true for kids anymore.
No.
They're not able to buy young. The prices have gone like crazy, and then rents have gone off the hook. So if we don't deal with some of those fundamental issues, we're going to have a challenge with people staying here, people being able to build their life, much less like the American dream, trying to build that future for their kids. We have huge wealth divides. It's still, Oklahoma's wealth divides by ethnicity and race are just awful.
Right.
And it's without a real effort, we're not going to see more people able to buy.
Since I have you here, and you mentioned calling your legislator, emailing, which is more effective in generally?
Like for advocacy?
Calling or emailing?
Calling.
Okay.
Yeah. So number one is face-to-face. Even if you can't talk to someone when some bill comes up, finding a few minutes to be eyeball to eyeball with your legislators is absolutely important because we are hit with a lot of lobbyists. We're hit with a lot of interest groups. And so knowing that it's a real person who lives in your district, there's nothing like a face-to-face connection for that. Even if it's 1 minute in their office, even if you go to one of their campaign events, one of their town halls and say hi, that changes how you, when I see somebody's name on the list who's called or emailed, I think of it differently because I know I've met that person, right? It's like all of us, we're humans, right?
Right.
It's not just a copy and paste thing. It's a real person. So first would be eyeball to eyeball, next would be phone, then email. Phone because it shows that it's you and that you're not just copying and pushing one button.
Right.
I mean, email works, but I feel like a lot of people spend a lot of time writing us perfect essays when they send us emails. And I understand that that's how I did advocacy before too, when I was outside the building. First of all, we truly don't have time to read everything carefully. We are slammed with information, although less than you would think, but we don't have a bunch of staff or something. I have one staff person that works for me. So we're moving fast. We're trying to skim things. Secondly, really what I want to know is, are you saying vote yes, vote no? What are you saying? So sometimes people write me a whole essay and I'm trying to connect the dots on what they want. Go ahead and tell me up front, like, hey, I want you to vote yes. Or I've had constituents say, hey, I care a lot about solar energy. If you see solar energy things, ask me for my opinion. Or, those kinds of things so that they're giving the clarity to me about what do they want from me. And if it's just I want to connect with you and I'll follow up later, that's fine. But be clear about what you want. I
know when I've emailed my various legislators, in the subject line, I always try to always put for HB,
good idea.
It's
a great idea.
Or against.
Yeah.
And just so that they know up front, with the thought being that the subject line may be all they see.
It's true. I mean, especially in busy weeks. So like next week's going to be a committee deadline week that, thank goodness we have deadlines because we get things done. But that means bills have to be heard in committee or they die. So there'll be a lot of things moving and they move fast. And frankly, back to my complaint about our process, agendas are not put out early. So agendas are put out 24 hours ahead. So if you're an advocate who cares about, let's say, solar energy, because I have one sweet constituent who always follows up with me about that.
Yeah.
And you see something on the agenda you care about, if you happen to be that in the know to notice that something's on the agenda, you're not even going to have 24 hours, right? So definitely keeping your email simple is good because we get a lot of email, especially if things are on a certain committee agenda.
Topics I would like to see the legislator take up. I would like an end to daylight saving time.
Yeah, we did a resolution 2 years ago. I think we did the resolution 2 years ago. I don't know if did it pass the House? I'm not sure. Sometimes once it exits the Senate, I can't track it all the way through the process.
Right. It seemed like what I recall, one chamber passing was to make it permanent, to make daylight saving permanent, which
the doctors agree with that, I believe.
No, they don't.
They're on the other side.
I know. I think the medical community doesn't like the change because of all the adverse effects.
Yeah.
But
we had strong opinions when that resolution came through. All the resolution would do was telling the federal government that we want you to take this up. Because truly the states can't decide solely by themselves. They have to have federal permission.
Arizona has done that.
They have federal permission somehow.
Wow.
That's my understanding, but it's not an interest area of mine. Nor did I have any constituents who pushed me too hard about it.
Okay. Well.
Yeah. But just to give you a sense of the variety of topics we take up in a day.
Oh, please do, yes.
You look at that, then we might be seeing something about plugging gas wells. We might be seeing something about math standards for the state. We might be seeing something about licensing. All the time people are trying to get us in the middle of their licensing issues. So the doctors' disagreement with the advanced practice nurses about pharmacy, the anesthesiologists disagreeing about the CRNAs who run, scope of practice things come up all the time. I've had to learn about all those industries more carefully. Auto dealers, medical marijuana, any day could be one of just dozens and dozens of topics. It's just fascinating. And then taxes, everything about our taxes, property taxes, sales taxes, income taxes, tax credits, just trying to understand how our state deals with money in, money out and deductions. It's every day. We could spend a lot of time on it, a bunch of topics.
I understand it's statewide. It is a state law or whatever it is that counties can have only 3 commissioners, no matter the size of the population.
Yes.
And I think that probably works well for 75 counties in the state, but there are a couple of counties that have a lot more people. And
I agree strongly with you.
Could use a little more representation.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we dictate county government structure very tightly. And I mean, there's counties that have 2,000 people, but they still have to have 8 highly paid county positions. So, I don't know that it's a logical structure. Oklahoma is very resistant to change. County leadership in those small counties have a lot of voice because they might be the biggest employer in their county.
Right.
And so there's a lot of fear. It's kind of like school districts' fear of consolidation.
Right.
Although it doesn't affect kids. It's a different situation. But I've worked on some
initiatives. The fact that Oklahoma has more school districts than Florida does
but we only have a quarter of what we had when we started. So
really?
Oklahoma is an independent, we're very populous. We had almost
we used to be anyway.
I think we had 2,000. Oh, we are. We can talk about that if you want. But we had like 2,000 school districts when we started. Now we're only in the 500s. Although I will point out that every time a charter opens, that's a new school district. So everyone wants us to have fewer, but then we're starting more and more. So, but when you talk about counties, I think we need to revisit in modern era what is important at county level. And it is different in rural than urban. It's very different in rural than urban. I don't like that Oklahoma County is so restricted around the number of commissioners, some of those ways that we function. And then, of course, a lot of the dictates about the jails and how the sheriff functions. I mean, those could be local decisions.
Yeah.
They could be, but we have mandated it from the top.
Let's change topics here. I understand when you say that you're very busy being a state senator, but what do you do for fun? What are your hobbies?
Well, a lot of it, being a parent is knee deep in their interests right now. So I have 2 high schoolers, one about to graduate. So we're doing a lot around preparation for the future.
Right.
And then my daughter's a 9th grader right now. So the
drama's just beginning for her.
She's really into high school. It's so fun. And she's a swimmer. So I've learned about swimming.
Oh, good.
I didn't know anything about swimming. I never did it. We just fumbled into it during COVID because we needed a sport that worked in the winter. And she's driven and very into it. So I've become a swim mom. And then my husband he's a musician. So he's a dentist who's really a musician is his heart. And so he plays a lot of music out. So we do some of that together. And then family. I have family around here. Okay. For fun, I love to read. I'm a big reader. Okay. I'm really grateful. During COVID, I really reignited that. I used to be a big reader. And then, having kids, I would just fall asleep when I would read. I mean, I literally went through a 10-year period where I only read the paper and magazines because I couldn't get through a book almost. Right. And so I'm back to just devouring. Right now, it's all fiction. I went through a good phase of reading nonfiction, but with the heaviness of my work, sometimes I just need fiction to get out of it. Sure. And I love to read. Kayaking and biking are kind of what my husband and I like to do together. Yeah, nice. But not serious. I'm hesitant to say I'm a cyclist or anything, but I love to get out in our city. Our trails and our river. Mm-hmm. And Overholser is one of my favorite places to go.
Nice. Yeah. And it is not as densely used as, say, Hefner.
No, I mean, if that lake was in California, it would be mobbed all the time. But you can get out there in Stinchcomb Reserve, and you might be the only person paddling through that part of the creek. It's just gorgeous. I love that. Yeah, so I don't do that enough, but that's if I get a good chunk of free time, we'll do that. I love it. And then my husband laughs that my hobby is really the campaign side of my world, because when you're in the legislature, that's not your only job. There's a whole other part of your world, which is getting elected, staying elected, and then as leader, I'm responsible to try to lead our campaign arm to try to elect more people. So I spend a lot of time recruiting candidates, going out and meeting with communities, trying to make connections. We have a very, we're a supermajority state dominated by one party. And so just trying to be in communication in rural Oklahoma as a minority party member is really important. So we've been doing town halls and community meetings because, we just need a diversity of perspectives out there.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. What committees do you serve on?
Well, the big ones are appropriations, which is the budget committee, and then finance. So those see taxes, revenue stuff. I've been on military and veteran affairs. I'm very glad for that. My dad was in the Air Force, as I said. And so like I'm interested in those issues. And then what's my last committee? Oh, new one, retirement and government affairs. So I've been learning a lot about the pension systems and the retirement systems. We do really, when we get committee assignments, we do have to specialize some to deeper in those topic areas. Yeah.
How much time, not necessarily for you personally, but as what you have experienced, what you've seen other colleagues on either side of the aisle, how much time is taken up daily in making fundraising phone calls?
Oh, a lot of people do very little of that.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I think in Congress, people have to do that a lot more.
Yeah.
You know, our budgets are not that big, but I mean, I consistently spend 3 hours a week. I'm one of the higher in terms of people in our caucus, at least. Now, when you're running, you have to spend more time.
Sure.
Our statewide folks have to spend a lot more time.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people complain about money in politics, but it's where we are and you have to deal with it, right? And so like sometimes I talk to people, they're like, oh, I just can't believe you know, they don't want to give because they don't want to be a part of such a system like that. And I'm like, well, I'm just a pragmatist. I'm like, here's where we are until somebody changes the system, which that's above my pay grade, what the Supreme Court says.
Yeah.
I'm going to work with the system we have, which is we need to have the funds in hand to talk to voters. And like, you know, in this media landscape, you know, this communications landscape, social media landscape, you don't just get attention automatically. Even if you have some viral posts, that's not the kind of consistent attention you need in order to help someone feel motivated to vote on a consistent basis or feel like their voice matters in our state. And so it takes money to do that, sadly. That's time. That's also our ability to reach people directly. Yeah.
Oh, gosh. Another current topic in data centers and water use. Mm-hmm. I know that's being discussed these days.
Yeah, I mean, you see some pretty heavy dysfunction between different levels of government. I'm worried about, you know, cities are trying to make deals because they want things to happen near them. You know, I just don't want us to give away all the benefits we might get from it, right? So if we're allowing that development to happen, the state already gives an ad valorem exemption, which is a property tax exemption to manufacturing. They count data centers as manufacturing.
Of course they do.
So,
and they pull
virtual manufacturing.
1 billion gallons of water a year out of the aquifer.
So they're paying someone for the water. That might be a city getting that money. That might be the GRDA, the Grand River Dam Authority. You know, think through that. Like, who's getting the money out of this thing, right? Construction companies are very happy. Luckily, a lot of those big national companies do pay for high-quality union labor for the construction. So we know, like, for instance, with Google, it was interesting. They really respect organized labor and make sure that their construction includes organized labor. But, like, who's benefiting from this, right? So I heard about one city that made a 25-year TIF. So basically they gave away all their incremental increase in property taxes for 25 years.
Wow.
And I was like, wait a minute, but then the state's already exempting the first 5 years, and we already have a sales tax exemption on electricity costs for them. Where is the money, right? It's only going to be a few employees running the thing. So I think we just have to balance these things. I'm not saying I'm not a ban the whole thing. I'm like, how do we make sure that we're being careful about our resources? We sure can't let them go into places that are water poor, and that there's a clean option happening. Like, what's the best way to make sure that any water that's used is not, you know, having to go through major treatment? What's the way to make sure we're using as much, like, for instance, Google wanted to go into industrial park in part because they could get so much clean energy. So they want wind energy and hydro energy. So like they're encouraging that part of the system that is clean energy, right? So we got to balance it out. It can't be an all or nothing thing, but I don't like when we start to feel rushed, like, oh, we're going to miss the economy. No, like we're a low-cost energy state. We have a lot of land. Like we're going to be an attractive option for these kinds of things.
Right.
Let's try to make it what we want it to be. I worry that we still have a little bit of a like little brother mindset where we think we're going to get left behind, you know? So, but man, people talk about populists. People are up in arms. That's part of that movement that's really happening where people are like, wait a minute, They're mad about data centers, and there's a whole part of the state that's very mad about wind farms and feels like it's impinging on their property rights. But then they want to make rules that would then impinge on the people's property rights that would be able to get money from the wind farms. So we have a really interesting populist movement happening.
Yeah. Okay. Do you get back to England often?
I haven't. I've only gone back 2 times. Once as a kid, once as an adult.
Okay.
Yeah. With Nathan, my husband and I were talking about that would be a fun trip again. But we haven't gone a lot of places with the kids, so we probably need to. We have a lot of places to go.
Does your husband play in a band?
Lots.
Or is he solo?
Multiple bands. So I make fun of him because he's a late bloomer as an artist. So he played in the Pride of Oklahoma. Like, he was a marching band guy.
Okay, yeah.
And he always played guitar. But, he went into dentistry, and so he wasn't a big band guy after. But in his 40s, he started playing pedal steel guitar.
Oh.
And one of his thoughts was, besides loving the sound of it, he also thought, here's a specialty instrument that people will need. Well, there's been a huge surge of interest in pedal steel guitar.
Yeah.
So he has a regular band called Buddy South and a regular band called MSG that play out. MSG plays around a lot more. And then he's been gigging with a lot of people. It's so fun. He's regularly playing with a guy named Ben Brock, who's a fabulous musician, singer-songwriter out of Norman.
Okay.
He just started playing with this Country Night Fever, which is like a 90s cover band. I've got to go see them. Unfortunately, I've been out of the habit of going to his gigs, and I need to get back into it to see, because he's really gotten good on the instrument.
Good.
And it's fun to listen to, because he's a perfectionist, but he's a realist that he's not going to go be a star or something.
Right.
He just wants to play.
Yeah.
He just has a great time playing.
Well,
so.
good for him.
Yeah. Yeah. It looks like one of our kids got those musical skills. I do not have them, so.
And nor do I.
Yeah. Yeah. We have to accept this sometimes, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Julia, thank you so much for spending time with me today.
Absolutely.
This has been so enlightening and fun to find out about some of the inner workings of the Capitol. One of my favorite Will Rogers quotes, you probably know the one, 2 things you don't want to ever watch being made, laws and sausage.
Oh, so true. So true. Don't give up, people. You can still pay attention.
This Town OKC, sponsored by Carpenter Square Theater, edited by Fred O.Bishop. I'm Rick Allen Lippert. This has been a Lippert Media production.